Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, Shareholder and Chief Growth Officer here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Geoff Brown. Hi, Geoff. Thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Hey, Jon. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. For those that don't know Geoff is the CEO at Illinois Society of CPAs, and we're going to be talking about retention challenges within the accounting industry, within the accounting profession, and specifically diving into a new report that was recently released called Writing Retention that the Illinois Society actually conducted and generated the report. So I think you hit on a really important topic, Geoff, for probably your members, but I also know all the firms that we interact with as well. So would you share with us just a bit of an overview around the survey you conducted, maybe why you decided to prioritize sending that survey out to your membership and getting some numbers around retention?
Yeah, Jon. One of the things that became pretty apparent to me, I'm pretty new to the organization, so a little over a year. I spent the first 60 days having a lot of conversations with firm leaders, members, different professionals, just really trying to get the lay of the land. And, there was a consistent theme around a retention challenge. So, me, I'm stepping back, trying to learn more, that sort of thing. This is really an issue that doesn't get talked about enough. We can't go a day without reading about the profession's retention challenges. It's not a new phenomenon, but it's one that needs more attention when you put it into the context of our larger talent acquisition and retention issues. There were a couple of things that drove us on the front end. We know that the firm model was never built on 100% retention, but the impact of consistently high turnover really has a high cost. We know that that's an issue for all professional services firms. We know it's especially an issue for public accounting firms. And so we really wanted to highlight some attention on the issue, identify why talent is leaving, get a really good understanding for what employers are doing, what they're thinking, and tell that story in a more meaningful way so that we can start addressing the cost that affects public accounting firms because of high turnover, and really arm firm leaders with some tools to think about how they can do things differently. At the end of the day, it's really about driving that conversation to how people can do something different to influence what we're dealing with on the retention front.
That is fantastic, Geoff. You and I were just chatting before we clicked record on this, and I was sharing with you, I was recently with a large group of HR leaders from mostly top 100 firms, and one of the key topics, well, if not the key topic, was around retention. We were actually talking about all sorts of different strategies firms are doing in the area of HR, and a few members pulled me aside kind of during a break and said, hey, all of this is great, but if we can't answer the retention problem, if we can't provide solutions around this, and retention fits closely with recruiting, and if you do all the work to recruit them and then you can't retain them, then there's some complexity there. But they were really diving into the retention piece. So I think more and more leaders within their firm and organizations in general are being looked at to prioritize the retention of their people as well. So I think your setup was well said, and I can see why your audience is really interested in this topic. So as you conducted the survey and as you started to compile the results, which the report is available now, we can make it available in our show notes or at least link to your site so they can access it. But as you started to compile the results and kind of dive into it, what are some of the key takeaways or some of the key highlights that you learned?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really wanted to accomplish was to get past the obvious issues. So work-life balance, burnout, compensation, those are really the top three issues that are driving the day. Not to say that they're not important, but I think there's more of a story to tell if you get underneath the hood of the retention issue. So I think, one of the things that's probably most important for employers to be aware of, their professionals are quitting their firms, not the profession. There was this prevailing idea that, employees that were leaving a firm were going to private equity, they're going to business and industry, they're getting out of the profession altogether. But actually, our research shows that they were actually going to other public accounting firms. So, I give employers kudos for wetting their whistle, getting them hooked on the profession. But we need to think about, why were they even open to having a conversation about going to a firm down the street or across town or whatever. So, quitting the employer, not the profession. That was one key takeaway for us. People are feeling the burnout from other people leaving their firms. So, we know that work-life balance and burnout is a cause for people leaving, but we don't talk enough about how that's getting pushed down to those people that stay. Thinking about people feeling the burn, but then that the high turnover hurts those individuals that stay with the firm. And on that last point, I think there's something very interesting about this. You may have seen this in your work, that the people that stick around, whether they're in the same job category, whether they're the people that those individuals report to, or they're the supervisors of people below them, everybody around that individual is taking on additional work, additional responsibilities because of that one individual leaving. And that's a really interesting phenomenon for us that we want to learn more about, and we'd love to hear your perspective on.
Absolutely. I was writing down your thoughts here because I love how you're introducing some new, commonly overlooked perspectives of this issue. I think operational leaders, HR leaders, firm managers, partners, leaders in organizations are looking for fresh ways to talk about this and to think about this. And I think you're hitting on a few that, honestly, I don't hear a lot of organizations talking enough about. So the whole concept of employees quitting their employer, to use your word, versus leaving the firm, leaving the industry or leaving the profession, I think is a really, really important one. I was recently speaking with a large firm, and they say, we love when we get contacted by someone, or if we're interviewing someone and we learn that they're actually leaving a current firm because of some certain situations maybe, or some certain reasons, because we know we're going to deliver and do our best to deliver a better experience for them. So when we hear, hey, we're leaving this firm, or I'm leaving this firm because fill in the blank, not flexible enough, not able to work in my highest and best use, not able to work on more interesting clients, whatever the case may be, those are the areas we're going to focus on with this individual. So people are leaving firms and going to other better firms that fit them. And so I think that is a reality people just need to understand. So we often say, Jeff, when we talk about firms and some of the changes they might need to make in their organization, a saying we steal from Henry Ford, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. If you think you can offer more flexible work environments, if you don't think you can, if you think you can't, you're right. Either way, it's more of the firm's mindset of how they're going to approach attracting it and retaining the best talent. And so that's within the firm's control, which is why I love your advice and love your point, because that is within their control. The topic around people that stay are getting kind of the trickle down effect or the trickle out effect or the ripple effect, of this. Oftentimes, Jeff, the people that experience the most hurt from individuals leaving are your best and brightest. Are the people that firms just can't afford to lose, and they're the ones that are taking the brunt of it. And you talked about the additional ripple effect that happens all around them. We talk a lot about the 4 competing priorities that your mid-level leaders experience. They have to manage their own work. They have to manage up. They have to manage down. They have to manage across. And guess what? There's a 5th, manage their clients. And all of a sudden, there's this huge ripple effect happening. So I love that you're introducing not only a new perspective that isn't talked about enough, but that perspective is one that's within controls of firms to influence. Mm-hmm. And it's one that helps firms and organizations understand how deep the effect goes, how wide and deep it goes within the firm.
Well, and I think this also affects one of the other key learnings that we had from the survey, and that's that the future matters. A lot of employees are really thinking about their own career advancement paths and opportunities. When you think about the impact that turnover has, when they see the people above them doing the same level of work that they're doing or doing work that isn't consistent with what they perceive that level to be doing, it makes them question, do I really want to be a senior manager? Do I want to be a managing director? Do I want to be a principal or a partner? Because they're doing work that doesn't jive with what I would have expected. And so, to the extent that we've been transparent about what those pathways look like, the skills that individuals would have had to master in order to get there, and then they see the work not lining up with that, I think it really causes this disconnect for them. And then you have this other side of, what if I see my mentor doing work that's at a level that's not consistent with what they should be doing? That really causes a lot of conflict for the individual employee. And so then they start to question whether or not, hey, am I ever going to get to that place? Do I want to get to that place? And that causes a crisis of leadership for a lot of firms.
That is such a good point. One of the trends we're talking a lot about right now, and you and I haven't even spoken about this, but it shows that I think we're both on track, which is good, that leaders must create confidence in the future of the firm and in the future of those that are reporting to them. And your example of, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard this as I have trained probably over 100 emerging leaders, in and around the accounting industry and profession, that oftentimes they're leaving their firm because they're looking up at the individuals above and they're thinking, I don't want their life. I don't want to do their work. I don't want what they have. And it's a really interesting thing to ask yourself as a leader in an organization. Is my role, is the work that I'm doing, is how I'm spending my time, is it attractive to those below me? Do they want this type of role? And if we answer our own question with a no, we got some changes to make. And to steal your phrase, the future matters. And it matters a lot to our younger people.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I was with a group of younger professionals, all with less than 3 years of experience last fall. Only one of them was licensed. The other four were in process. The rest of the group wasn't sure. So we started talking about the obvious. Don't you want to be a partner? Don't you want to be a leader? And there was a consistent theme of, like, I look at what my partners are doing. I look how they live. I look at the hours. I look at their just approach to work, and I'm not sure I want that. And so it's really interesting that you connected it to one of these issues.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a couple of other things that I think are important to mention. Job hopping is a myth. That came out in the survey. We know that 67% of our respondents had only had one or two employers since entering the profession. And that's, something that I hear all the time, that people are bouncing around. I think that was just kind of an effect of the pandemic and an above average job market, meaning we were paying a premium for talent. That was causing people to be open to conversations about jumping ship. But it didn't really come out in the research that we conducted. So I think we can cool our jets there. We know that the job market is softening. And so we can really focus on the conditions that we're creating inside of firms to make sure people are open to staying, which leads us into the next conversation, is this disconnect between employers and employees. So one of the key findings that we had is that 33% of employees felt like they were never asked about what they value most in the workplace and the associated benefits. And a lot of the employers, 28% said they never asked what their employees most value. So that kind of disconnect is really interesting to me, because just going up to one of your employees and saying, in a really intentional way, what is it that you value most? What can we do to make this a workplace where you want to stay, thrive, and be a part of for the long term? Because that opens up a more transparent dialogue, an opportunity to have a very intentional conversation about their place in the firm, an opportunity to be transparent about what their career path could look like and the opportunities that exist.
Such great advice. And when do those conversations typically happen? Right now.
When someone's on their way out the door.
When someone's on their way out the door. Exactly, which is the wrong time to be having it. And so And you use the key word stay. How do you turn exit interviews into stay interviews, right? So you can understand what's important to your next generation. You can understand what will get them to stay and to view your firm as a long-term option for their career, right? We were just doing a session where we talked about motivators within employees, and you could have 5 employees and have 5 different motivators, right? You know this, Jeff. And so understanding, hey, John's motivators might be different than Jeff's and might be different than Susie's, and that's okay. But I want to know, as a leader in this firm and the people that I want to keep, especially, I want to know what their motivators are right now. And guess what? Those motivators can change over time, right? They can change through career cycle, through life stages, career stages, things of that sort. And so I love your advice here around what leaders could be doing. So in addition to that, Jeff, do you have any other recommendations on retention strategies, or do you have any other ways in which you would hope that our listeners maybe start to think differently about this area of retention?
Of course, of course. I think top line though, we shouldn't just accept that high turnover is a part of the public accounting model. I don't think we're in that day and age where we can just say, "Yep, this is just how it is." We really need to address the retention issues with that 1 to 5 year employee, because that's going to be key to solving our overall talent issues. If you include them in the pipeline, that proverbial pipeline, there's a tremendous point of leakage in that 1 to 3 year period. And so that's really where we need to place a lot of focus. I think more frequent conversations with talent are necessary. When we were getting ready to do this survey, we convened a group of managing partners here in Illinois, and there was a consistent theme of, I wish I had known. Well, you'll never know unless you ask. So just being more intentional about having those conversations with your talent. And then pushing shared ownership and responsibility for retaining our best and brightest. There were a couple of managing partners in that cohort that said, you know what, we're going down a path where we're going to make more individuals responsible and accountable for retaining our people. I'm sure that's going to manifest itself in promotion opportunities, comp, and once you start dealing with comp, that's when people start paying attention. I think there's some other things that people can do. Always listening to your people and genuinely considering their perspectives. All of us do these listening tours, but how many of us really act on the things that we're uncovering when we're interacting with our employees? And then just, being honest and responsive. That came up a bit in some of the focus groups of, they said one thing, but then they did another. And then being transparent and approachable. So as we're thinking about, how do career pathways manifest themselves, just being transparent about that process. Being open to employees doing that kind of, drop by, walk in, don't have, too many layers or too many obstacles between you and them as you're thinking about those retention conversations. But, at the end of the day, I really think it's around, fostering the right strategy, stewarding your human capital resources in an effective way, and then just really having a good organizational culture. I think every public accounting firm wants to talk about the culture of their organization, and it's about having the right culture, because when you have the right culture, people aren't even open to leaving.
That is excellent closing advice, Jeff. I saw, and I do not take credit for this, I saw this somewhere, I forget who said it, but they said culture beats strategy every time. And that, I think that really sums up what you just said there in kind of your closing remarks. So Jeff, would it be all right if we did put a link to your report in the show notes?
100%. We want to get this into as many hands as possible, and I think your listeners can expect in the near future just some bigger thoughts from us on what it is that firms, different employers can really double down on in order to retain their best and brightest. This isn't the end of this conversation.
Well, we appreciate you allocating resources within your team and all the strategic thinking and time that went into this study. This is one of the most pressing topics in our industry and our profession, and your survey will be a fantastic resource for people to start to get a more well-rounded perspective of how to maybe think about this differently and ultimately create new approaches within their organization. So for our listeners, hopefully you enjoyed the conversation between Jeff and I. Here at Boomer Consulting, we release new episodes of the Boomer Briefing podcast every Tuesday morning. This week, of course, it was on talent and retention strategies. Next week, it may be technology or growth or process or leadership. But the common theme among all those topics is we believe they are relevant to your firm and relevant to your organization's future. So thanks for listening, and please subscribe. Thanks, Jeff.